Thutmose has been out for months now. He is the most recent gold key commander to be introduced to this game, and nobody really uses him because they think his active skill damage is too low. I finally finished expertising him through the daily special offer in Rise of Kingdoms, and I really didn't know how good he was. So guess what I did? I went online, like most of you probably do, and tried to look up a Thutmose III double relic guide. How good is he? How good does he compare? And guess what? I couldn't find anything. So, you know what I did?
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Welcome back. As you all know, this is Big Kane, and we are out of my KVK, so it gives me some time to mess around with other pairings and kind of plan for the future. And with the introduction of Zhuge Liang, I needed 2 archer marches in my murder ball to make up my 6, right? So I've got Boudica, I've got YSG, I've got Zhuge Liang, and I've got Ami, which is what I was originally planning on going with, but they never released her relic, so I was like, okay, there's no harm, no foul in looking at Thutmose. So I've done a lot of research into Thutmose lately, which is how we landed on this guide. So first of all, I'm going to go over a brief summary of his skills. Second, we're going to go over his museum buff and actually how that was nerfed, so it must have been too strong. And then lastly, I have test results here against other meta commanders, and let me tell you, it's going to shock you. All right. So let's get into his kit. I'll try to make this a little quick since you all probably know what it is. This is the main criticism for Thutmose right here, okay? His kit is actually pretty good, but everyone's like, his active skill a little weak, right? So I do want to also say it is an AoE, so it really can't be that weak, all right? Yes, the damage factor is low. Damage factor of 1,000 to 3 targets, reduced by 15%, pretty standard. It also does reduce healing by a small margin of 30%. But yes, the damage factor is a little bit low. So next up, we have all archers led by this commander gain 15% increased attack and march speed, which is really important for archers. And this is a big one. 15% increased damage outside of alliance territory. That is a massive all damage buff. Next up, we have archer defense is increased by 10%, small amount, but it is kind of nice, I suppose. And then it has a debuff, so 15% skill damage taken on the enemy for 3 seconds, which is quite nice, right? So next up, we had 10% less counterattack damage. Again, not anything great, but it also has a Thorns effect of hitting somebody for about 700. And lastly, his expertise, which just recently got changed to buff him a little bit more, reduces the damage taken from infantry units by 5%, and then when he uses his active skill, they gain 30% bonus to their normal attack damage. So just looking at his kit, he does everything mediocre. That's just kind of what Thutmose does. He does it all. He has AoE damage. He has all damage. He has a debuff. He has a Thorns, right? He has normal attack damage, right? But it's just, and they're all just mediocre. They're all mediocre stats. So that's why his relic is so important. But before we get into the relic, okay, there's something that I want to talk about really briefly, and that is actually the comparison from Thutmose to Nebuchadnezzar, right? When you are thinking about the best 2 archer pairs in the game, okay, you're going to have Boudica with either Artemisia or YSG, and then you're going to have Zhuge Liang with Nebu. In my opinion, those are the 2 best marches that you could possibly make if you're only bringing 2 to the open field. Now you can make some adjustments and go maybe Zhuge Liang with Boudica primary, and then you could do maybe a Henry with Nebu secondary, but then you're not really getting the YSG in there. Anyway, I think for open field, while Henry is great, Nebu AoE kind of outclasses that. Anyway, so if we have Boudica with YSG, and then we have Zhuge Liang with Nebuchadnezzar, well, if I don't have Nebu, which you can see is only 2-3-1-1, I don't know why it's even 2-3-1-1, but let's just compare his kit to Thutmose's kit, all right? His active skill, much stronger than Thutmose, okay? It is 5 targets, 1,500 AoE, okay? No debuff, but that doesn't really matter too much, okay? Then it has the march speed, 5% more than Thutmose, and then 20% more defense than Thutmose, okay? So this is also a little bit better than Thutmose. Makes sense. Then we have this, which is the counterattack damage increase for rallies. which does absolutely nothing in the open field. This does literally nothing unless you are leading a rally attack, okay? Then we have the 15% all damage. Sound a little familiar, right? And it has a debuff to reduce rage. Sound a little familiar, okay? These two commanders are very, very similar in their kit, and I need you to recognize that is why when you see in these test results, they're going to be pretty shocking. So, again, they both have March Speed, they both have all damage, they both have a debuff, and they both have AoE, okay? They are very, very similar, so if you're thinking about those two pairs and you don't have Nebu, but you have a maxed out Thutmose, well, maybe you just use the Thutmose. And so, before we get into that, and before we get into the test results, let's hop into the Relic and how it was changed. So, here we are in the museum, and if this looks new to you or you don't know what this is, basically once you get into Season of Conquest KVKs, which is KVK 4 and beyond, you get access to the museum and relic system, which allows you to go in and buff old commanders. This is kind of their way of saying that, hey, we know that you guys haven't had access to these new fancy commanders yet, so we're going to give you the chance to basically buff the commanders that you have been using so that they're usable in the open field. And well, for most of these, the Relic does not make them meta commanders, except for some commanders that are still really good, like Ethelfled, or Minamoto, or YSG. I personally upgraded Richard just for the farming, but besides the point, right? We're going to go all the way over here to Thutmose, and you can see that I have unlocked the double Relic for him. And when you click on it, the first iteration of this Relic, which was one Relic, he had 15% archer health and 15% archer defense. And the double Relic situation for Thutmose is 25% attack and 20% health. Now, this used to be, for about a week, this used to be 30% attack and 30% health, okay? This was later nerfed to be 25 and 20, and nobody did any testing, or I guess maybe a few people did some testing, and they found that 30-30 was way, way too strong. So 25 and 20, well, that's got to be pretty good too, right? So, knowing what we know now and the amount of stats that this gives compared to something like Nebu, well, should do pretty well in the open field. Let's hop into the test results. Okay, so here we have our test results, and thank you to my alliance members JTR and JTT, whose full name you'll see later in this video, but I probably shouldn't say out loud. And we basically went ahead into an Ark of Osiris practice match, and we put Boudica with Thutmose against a bunch of other meta commanders and meta pairings. And I will say the results here are pretty insane. So first up, we started out with Boudica Thutmose versus Boudica YSG. This was actually a pretty big difference and kind of shows you the power of YSG, but I also would like to say that there are an absolute ton of variations when it comes to Archer 1v1s due to the talents and honestly a lot of the skills that are on these commanders. Again, we did no gear on these tests, no armaments on these tests. I am VIP 17 and he was VIP 18, so we had the 5% all damage as a pairing, so it really was not any variations as far as gear goes in these tests. So we had Boudica Thutmose versus Boudica YSG, and we had the winning for the Boudica YSG. But then we had the winning for the Boudica Thutmose. So, a lot of these are very random, so I believe we ran it again. And this was a little bit closer, but Boudica YSG pulled out the W. So 2-1 for the Boudica YSG, which is obviously very good meta pairing. We then, now look at this, went ahead and ran it against Boudica Artemisia. And Boudica Thutmose won pretty convincingly. We went ahead and ran it again, and Boudica Thutmose lost by a little bit. We ran it again, and Boudica Thutmose won. So if you're comparing Boudica with Artemisia and Boudica YSG versus Boudica Thutmose, well, Boudica Artemisia actually did significantly worse. We then went ahead and we're like, all right, well, Tommy's not the answer. don't run Boudica with Tommy. That's not a good 1v1 combination. We then, and this is where it gets really interesting. Like I was saying, we're comparing, the big comparison is we are comparing Nebu with Thutmose in these test results, and Boudica Thutmose convincingly beat Boudica with Nebu. This was where I was like, wait, this must be pretty good. We went ahead and ran again. Boudica Thutmose won again. We ran it again, and Boudica Thutmose crushed it. I mean, this is a 7,000 sev wound differential here, and I started to think, wow, this combo is pretty insane. We then ran Boudica with YSG one more time because, hey, it was 2-1, so let's see. And we had a very, very close matchup again, but Boudica YSG did end up losing, so now that variation is 2-2. We then went ahead and dueled with Boudica Ram, and Ram would make sense as to why it's a strong 1v1 combination with Boudica, as it does have all single target damage and a bunch of defense. It was a very, very, very close match. In fact, it lost the Sev wound differential. Am I reading that right? No, it won the Sev wound differential, but it was still very, very close. We then got into Gilga, and I do understand that we only ran one iteration of this test, but Gilga actually performed really, really well into the Thutmose. I'm pretty sure it's because once you get lower than 50%, you get that all damage buff. And then lastly, we ran the Cyrus, and this wasn't even close. Boudica Thutmose absolutely destroyed the Cyrus. So this was the end of my testing with JTR. We only did Archer versus Archer pairs, and it was only Boudica Thutmose versus Boudica with other pairings. But now we're going to go into some other test results that I did a little bit later, which has a little bit more variation. This time around, I used a lot more Zuge with Thutmose because that is the combination that I feel is the Zug with Nebu replacement, right? And also what I'll be running in KVK. So we wanted to test how Zug with Thutmose would do in a realistic situation. So again, we used 210,000 troops. We also had a little bit of variation here in the fact that I was using a 5% city skin theme for health for archers because JTT had the special unit for, without showing the results, special unit for archers because he is our rally and garrison possibly lead for archers in this kingdom. But anyway, let's go over the results here. So Zug with Thutmose, I mean, this was the most convincing slaughter I've ever seen. I really don't even think that it gets much better with Boudica. I mean, I get that Guanskip is not a great dual march anymore, and that the counter of archers really hurts it because you can't even silence Zug and Boudica because they have that shrug off effect. But this was absolutely disgusting, 18-38. We then started running some meta archer commanders, and look at this. If you think that Henry is a great commander for archers, which he is, I don't doubt, we ran Zug with Thutmose versus Zug with Henry, okay? Thutmose has AoE and a debuff. Henry just has raw single target damage, so this test result was shocking to me, okay? It barely beat Zug with Thutmose. We ran it again. Oh, sorry, we did not run it again. We might later. But we ran the Nebu versus Thutmose comparison multiple times this time around because this is what we really wanted to see. Okay? The first time around, the Nebu won. And remember, he's got the special unit and I have a 5% help team. This next time around, he won again. So I was like, okay, looks like Nebu's probably better in this variation a little bit. Okay, wait. So now the Thutmose is winning, and we're like, oh god, so here we go again. And so right now it's 2-1 for the Nebu variant rather than the Thutmose variant, and we'll do some more duels later on. We have some more, don't worry. We then ran Thutmose with Zug versus Boudica with YSG, and do remember that I assume that Boudica is a better dueling commander than Zhuge Liang. It doesn't have the AoE, obviously, so that makes sense. But anyway, we ran this just to be sure on how it would do. The Boudica with YSG did win. We ran again, very, very similar result, and the Boudica with YSG won again. And then we're like, okay, well, how does Zug and YSG do? And this pair is an absolute AoE monster nuke. It beat Boudica YSG in a 1v1. And I will say, if I ever have some sort of march speed support skill or anything like that, I am pairing Zug with YSG 100,000%. This combination does so much area of effect damage, it's going to be disgusting. Similarly, even if I don't have the march speed, but we have like a runes or an altar fight coming up where I can really micromanage one march, I might just bring Zug YSG anyway, because those trades are going to be absolutely crazy. We ran the Zug with Thutmose versus the Boudica with Zug, and this should be no surprise. Boudica with Zug is just the best dual march in this game. It even beats Nevsky Joan in a 1v1, so we really weren't expecting much here. It lost by about 8,000 Sev wounds. Then we ran Boudica with Rams against Zug with Thutmose. The Zug with Thutmose lost. We ran the Zug with Ram versus the Zug with Thutmose, and this obviously shouldn't be very surprising. The Ramses is very strong in the 1v1s. And then here we go. We were like, okay, well, what were we really testing, right? It was the Nebu in the open field versus the Thutmose. And this was a very, very convincing win for the Zug with Thutmose versus the Nebu. And then just for the tiebreaker, we ran it one last time, and another very, very convincing win for the Zug with Thutmose. All right, so after all that testing, what are my concluding thoughts? Is Thutmose good? Is he really someone that I would use? And my answer to that is actually yes. Do I think that he's better than Nebuchadnezzar in the open field? No, I do not. I'm not saying that bench your Nebu for your Thutmose. That's not what I'm saying. I think the damage factor on your Nebu is going to bring you more than the Thutmose would. However, if you have something like Boudica, YSG, and Zug finished, and then you have your Thutmose finished like I do, and you're like, wow, should I invest in another Archer Commander before the new one comes out in, I don't know, 9 months from now, and put my gold heads elsewhere into other meta commanders like Nevsky, or, I mean, Sargon probably not, but Skippy, right? I would say the difference between Thutmose and Nebu, or Thutmose and Artemisia, or Thutmose and Ramses is almost non-existent. He is with his double relic. He is really, really, really well-rounded. Now, would I use him as a primary in the open field? No, I would not, because if people see you using a gold key commander in the open field, you got a big old target saying noob on top of your head. So I wouldn't recommend that. But I do think he is a fantastic replacement or placeholder for a stronger Archer March to come down the line. I personally will not be investing into any other Archer unless I, for some reason, start using 3 Archer pairs in the open field, and I'm going to ride it out with Thutmose until the new Archer arrives and I can replace him. So, what do you think? I mean, do you agree with my test? Did I do something wrong? Did this convince you that Thutmose is actually a pretty good commander and that not all you need is a high active skill damage? Well, let me know in the comments. Alright, please like and subscribe. We've got other events and KVK, pre-KVKs coming up soon and all that good stuff. So there will be new content out. Again, I appreciate you guys watching the video. I hope you learned something, because man did I. Throughout all this testing, I really thought he was going to be a bust, but that double relic is legit. So again, hope you guys learned something. I'll see you in the next one, and stay safe.